In 1930 Chicago, it was highly forbidden for blacks and whites to intermarry in most cases. But some did it anyways. And you'll be surprised to find out which type of blacks and which type of whites were involved in such risky engagements. So let's take a look. We're continuing from the 1945 book Black Metropolis by sociologists St. Clair Drake and Horace Cayton. Respect. In 147 of these 188 cases of intermarriage, the Negro partner was the husband. Way more Negro men than women decided to dabble on the other side. A whole lot more of them at that, as we'll see as we continue. Now, when I say the other side, I'm speaking in terms of the racial worldview. The Earpoise worldview doesn't make racial distinctions within the group. So within this framework, the idea of race is irrelevant. But inside the racial worldview, race is extremely important and it acts as a critical divider. That's why I'm saying Negro men dabbled more often on the other side. That so few white men marry Negro women may be partly accounted for by the fact that such marriages endanger the economic position of the white wage earner even more than that of the Negro. The white man had a lot to lose. He might lose his high-paying job, his high status in his community, and his social network. Furthermore, the Negro women most likely to attract white men are at a premium in the Negro community. Competition was fierce for those women. Also, since it is the male partner who plays the more aggressive role in contracting marriage, and since white women are forbidden fruit to Negro men, it is not surprising that more Negro men than white marry across the color line. Men are the pursuers, and men like to chase what is difficult or forbidden to catch, which in this instance for some Negroes was white women. It is this one-sided aspect of intermarriage that irks Negro women. It makes her hot to see this, especially if she was single. She was trying to figure out, what does this white woman have that she didn't have? Proportionately fewer Negroes of high social status, except intellectuals and bohemians, marry white persons. The intellectuals were the critical thinkers, those engaged in the world of ideas. The bohemians were the unconventional blacks who didn't conform to most of the social norms. Outside of these two groups, most high-status blacks did not marry white women. And here's why. Both the social controls of the Negro community, which make it difficult for a person occupying a responsible position to make such a break, and the satisfactions that come with being at the apex of a social group, even though it is a subordinate one, deter such persons. In other words, if they married a white woman, they would lose status in the already low-ranking black community. That's what's meant by being a subordinate one. And for many of them, the loss of high status in the black world was enough to deter them. Among bohemians and intellectuals, however, intermarriages are tolerated by the Negro group just as eccentric behavior by their white counterparts is tolerated by the general society. Why? Because they were somewhat like outsiders in the mainstream black community. The black intellectuals and bohemians were on the fringe of the community. So what they did way over there in regards to marrying white women was more tolerated. Just like the hippies in the 60s and the 70s were tolerated by the white society. These people were already on the edge and expected to do things different from the core group. But a Negro professional man, businessman, or politician would, under ordinary circumstances, endanger his position of leadership and responsibility by marrying a white woman, regardless of her status. So he had to be strategic, even if he did want to dabble on the other side. Think about Obama. Even though his lineage is not from Black America, he was still accepted into the Black American community. But if he would have had a white wife on his side, then black votes most certainly would have gone down. And I suspect he must have understood this to some degree during his college days, especially if he knew that he was going to be a career politician. He had to present himself with the right image, and a white wife would not have worked. That would have worked against him, right? Let's be honest. But I'm sure that him being a college student at Harvard, there were no shortages of white women that tried to swoop down on him. But he just had to know when to say no. Just like the earlier Negro professionals and politicians in this earlier Chicago black community had to do. Now, this doesn't imply that without any real consequences, that all or even most of them would have went to white women. It's just saying that there was a check in place that deterred those of high status who may have secretly desired to do so. There is practically no intermarriage within the present-day Negro middle class, which is even more conservative than its white counterpart. Members of the Negro middle class have fewer social contacts with and opportunities for meeting white people than do lower-class or upper-class Negroes. In most instances, their self-contained world gives them enough satisfaction so that they have scant interest in the world of white society and little tolerance for those who have. The same is true, though to a lesser degree, of the respectable lower class. So the respectable lower class and the middle class Negroes did not get down this way, according to the authors. They stuck to those of the brown complexion. Before the Great Migration, however, intermarriages were more frequent among ordinary, relatively stable, working-class individuals, particularly servants. Some of these families are still intact, and most of their children and grandchildren, now adults, have merged with the general Negro community. There are, however, two groups in the general society which not only tolerate, but, by their social philosophies, tend to encourage intermarriage. One is the Baha'i movement, a religious group, while the other is made up of left-wingers, various groups of communists, socialists, and other political radicals. If not identified with one of these deviant groups, the white partner in a Negro-white marriage is not infrequently a foreign-born person who is not completely assimilated into American culture and does not fully realize the implications of intermarriage or did not at the time that the marriage occurred. They hadn't yet had their minds converted into white consciousness. They were from another part of the world with different ideas and different culture. So they didn't entirely comprehend what they were getting themselves into by marrying the Negro. A case in point is that of an Italian, whose Negro wife described their courtship as follows.
The white people I worked for were Italian, and I met my husband through them. He hadn't been here in this country very long and didn't speak very good English. We started going out together, and in a short time, he asked me if I would marry him. He said he wanted me to meet his family. I was surprised. My parents were dead, so I wrote and asked my uncle what to do. He said it was okay and for me to quit worrying. Then I went over to my husband's house to meet his family. They were drinking wine and eating spaghetti, and everybody was talking in Italian. His dad told me that he didn't care what color I was so long as I was a good woman. He then told me that he wanted me to marry his son. Al, my husband, said we could get married in the city hall. We didn't need to be married in the Catholic Church. So we were.
This family had not yet been converted. Now watch this. The white partners, both men and women, are, on the average, in lower occupational levels than the white population as a whole. He's saying that Negroes grabbed mostly economically lower status whites. In other words, the whites that didn't have much to lose. Negro husbands of white women, on the other hand, are generally higher in the scale than the average Negro and often higher than their wives. So these Negro men were apparently economically better off than average, and still grabbing white women who were economically low in status. Not that income is the main consideration when choosing a partner, but money does matter for male selection power. So if Negro men with money were choosing white women without it, then what does that imply? Among the Negro brides of interracial marriages, however, unskilled workers, including domestic servants, predominate. Intermarried couples have their problems. One of the primary difficulties is keeping a job, and here both partners usually find or feel it necessary to conceal their marriage from white employers. Most of the intermarried couples interviewed talked rather freely about themselves, but when the subject of their employment arose, they did not like to give any information.
That's one subject we're both reticent about, because he would lose his job as soon as I would lose mine if they found out that his wife is white.
a wife remarked.
Yes,
The husband said.
I am sure of that.
I stayed home from May to August when he was sick. I couldn't let it be known that I was his wife. I was supposed to be in New York. I had to be careful that nobody from the office saw me while I was supposed to be away. I had to step about the house quietly because the people from his railroad line came to visit him. I had a colored woman here, and I went to the kitchen when visitors came. We have to be careful because we're buying our home and can't afford to lose our jobs. If we had enough money to be independent, we wouldn't care who knew we were married.
You see how different a world we live in today in America compared to this? This was real life for people back then, and they were taking real chances by doing the things they were doing. But the times have done what? They have changed, as they will continue doing as everything continues in motion. Mixed couples also often experience great difficulty in securing a place to live. In most cases, except where the Negro partner is light enough to pass, it is necessary for them to live in a Negro community. The exceptions to this rule seem to be rather old, established mixed couples who have been living in mixed Negro-white neighborhoods for many years. Such families report little opposition from neighbors who have known them over a long period of time. They may experience difficulty, however, if the composition of the community changes. Meaning if a different set of whites moved in and had strong opinions against the interracial arrangement. The couples may have received dirty looks, and the energy in the whole environment would have felt greatly different. Within the Negro community, many of the better apartment houses and hotels will not rent to intermarried couples for fear that they are not really married and therefore are not respectable. Certain hotels within the Negro community have the reputation of catering to common law mixed couples and to white prostitutes and their Negro pimps. Wait, didn't they just get to the city not too long before this? And the street culture is already brewing like this? You got Negro pimps putting the Mac down on white women way back in the day like this? This is what certain Negroes started doing as soon as they touched down in the city. Giving life to the ghetto street culture, along with the fast-paced white women, all in cahoots. Respectable couples are continually complaining that the existence of such establishments makes it hard for them to convince rental agents and neighbors that they are legally wedded and law-abiding. And because they had this relationship going on, certain hotels couldn't distinguish between legitimate couples and pimping couples. This was wild, wasn't it? One wife reported that when she first moved into the Black Belt, she found notes in her mailbox saying,
"We don't want poor white trash in this neighborhood,"
showing you that blacks used some of the same tactics that whites used. Of course, not nearly as much, but the point is that they were not completely innocent. She remarked,
"At first, I was worried, but then I thought that I wasn't trash and shouldn't be concerned." I ignored the notes after that.
The reaction to intermarriage in lower-class white families is sometimes very violent. The economically lower-class whites were the real foot soldiers in the white supremacy movement. Since they didn't have much in terms of resources, they were the most fierce when it came to protecting the status of whiteness. And sometimes that meant being very violent. The following conversation took place between two white men who knew of two white girls who had married Negroes.
Are the girls' people still living?
Sure, but they are barred from their parents' home. Last summer, one of the relations died, and Willie said he would kill the nipple lovers if they dared show their faces around. They didn't show up at the wake or at the funeral, neither.
Do you think Willie would really start trouble if they wanted to pay their parents a visit?
Christ, yes. Whenever he gets a couple of shots under his belt, he goes out looking for any nipple. As soon as he spots one, it means trouble. He got cut up about 15 different times, but he just keeps on looking for trouble. Someday he will get a good cutting and he will learn his lesson.
I wonder if the parents were the same way about the thing that Willie is.
I don't know, but they are ashamed for what the girl's done. Once the father was going to get them arrested, but he figured that if one of the newspapers got hold of the story, it would be in print and everybody would know about it then. So he just disowned them and let it go at that. Ethel was quiet and good-looking, and she was well-built. She could have got herself some nice white fellow if she wanted to, but I suppose that after she got in with her sister's crowd, they went on parties with colored people, and then she teamed up with one of them. You know, that thing called love is great. But I don't think I ever could marry a boogie.
Which is another name for Negro. It is ordinarily difficult for the white partner in an interracial marriage to maintain steady friendships with other white people. A white woman married to a Negro related this.
I still have a dear friend that works downtown. She doesn't ever come to see me since I was married, but she always calls me, and whenever I am downtown, I go in and see her. You know how they feel toward me. They look at my husband as some kind of beast. He has made me a better husband than most of theirs have.
Interracial couples have to watch out for themselves.
Commented another woman.
If they're in trouble, they can't count on help from anybody but themselves.
They broke the social norms, and that was the price that came with it. One of the most annoying problems that intermarried couples must face is that the white woman, for the white partner is usually a woman, will not be considered respectable by Negroes or whites. Here we go. Nearly all couples interviewed expressed fear of such censure. Even women who had been married for years and had raised families still felt defensive about this prevalent attitude. One woman, quite advanced in years, stated,
"The colored don't like white women married to colored men. They say they are white trash. My sons won't let anybody say that about their mother."
A young Negro girl coming to the defense of the white wife in an interracial marriage, whom she knew, revealed this general opinion.
I knew a white lady who was married to a colored man. They owned their own home, and he had a business. They had 3 girls, and one of the girls and I were pals. I was in their home a great deal. I called her mother, and she was a wonderful woman. It makes me mad when I hear anyone say when you see a white person marrying the Negro race, they are poor white trash. I know mother wasn't any trash.
The widespread feeling that a white person who marries a Negro is necessarily of lower social status has some basis in reality. So this is what the authors who lived during that time concluded, that it was based on some sense of reality. It wasn't just made up. Negro men pursued lower status white women, and lower status white women selected Negro men. Now, this is obviously in the general sense because I'm sure there were some exceptions, but this here must have been the rule. It also reflects the fact that Negroes unconsciously accept their assigned status as inferiors, meaning Negro men saw lower status white women as still a step up. So on the status scale, it would go lower, middle, upper status black women, and above them would come the lower status white women. That's the unconsciously accepting their assigned status as inferior, which I'm telling you is marked by the name black. It carries unconscious associated ideas with that label, and inferior is one of them. They find it hard to conceive of a sane or decent white person giving up higher status to marry a Negro. Negro means black, and black is inferior to white in Western ideology. So the black community believed that the white woman must have been trash because they could not fathom, they couldn't imagine how a white person in their right mind would step from their higher status of whiteness to go down into blackness. You see? So let's stop right here, and we're going to pick up with some more drama in the next commentary. I thank you right now for your time and attention. My name is Brooklyn St. Michael, and I'll see you in the free world.